You could just put it in front of me and I'll jump around, inshallah.
Oh, just put it right in front?
I think so. I think it'll work, yeah. Just
Just watch for the.
catching my.
I'm sorry to put it right in front of you.
It's okay. It's requested. All right. We go Bismillah.
This is what we took last time, right?
No.
Like, do you know if there's an issue with erasing what's on this side?
Erase it, yeah.
Please.
You gonna take this?
What do you need, son?
Can't read it.
You could do 2 rakas and go home carefully. Lock the door when you go home and rest. Don't just jump on devices. All right. All right, cool. Go rest a little bit. I'll come wake you up at 9 or 10. All right. We're going to move some things around if you're present. I'll see you in a minute. La ilaha illallah. Muhammad Rasulullah. Would you grab me that podium? I'll just set this here for a sec. La ilaha Thank you. All right. Forgive all the movement, guys. I figured I'd save us all a little time for you all to be logging in while we were moving around. And if you're following the recording, hopefully you understood to skip ahead of that. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum to those who are online. And alhamdulillah, despite the movement, we did save some time. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa sallallahu wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi wa tabi'ina lahum bi ihsan ila yawmiddin wa alayna ma'ahum wa fihim bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin. نوينا التعلم والتعليم والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والتذكير والمذاكرة والحث على التمسك بكتاب الله وبسنة رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على الخير ابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى. ونوينا ما نوى صاحب الكتاب وما مشايخنا وما علمه الله من صالح النيات. Alhamdulillah, we're continuing this lesson in Nahu, in this blessed text We ask Allah's assistance in that, in Lutf and Afia. And alhamdulillah, we're studying the language of Al-Habib Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in his month. Alhamdulillah. Wa shukr lillah ala dhalik. Wa huwa khayru man nataqa bid-dad. The best of those who use the letter al-dad. And Arabic is lughatul dad. So that's an aspect. You can intend with Arabic is the following the Prophet ﷺ in his language. And as we know, it's the language of Jannah, the language of Allah's book. Alhamdulillah wa shukrulillah ala dhalik. So we took last week the wow, niyabatul wow, an al-dhamma. And today we will take, or we'll begin with, the saying of the author, قال وأما الألف or أما الألف فتكون علامة للرفع في تثنية الأسماء خاصة. However, prior to that, we'll review a little bit of what we took. Wow is a sign of Rafa in how many cases? Two. What's the first one? Jama al-Mudhakkar as-Salim. What's an example of Jama al-Mudhakkar as-Salim? Or just Mu'minun. Correct. Mu'minun. What is the second case? Al-Asma' wal-Khamsa, which are the Asma' al-Khamsa, Abuka wa Akhuka wa Hamuka wa Fuka wa Dhu Mal. You'll see in later texts they'll add Hanuka. And we might find that there's lughat that use it that way and others don't. There's sometimes one dialect will have one i'rab and another dialect would have another, meaning like one tribe would do it one way and another would do it another way. La ilaha illallah. Or region, like the way they spoke in the Hijaz might have been different than the way they spoke in other ways. And recitations will reflect that too. طيب. Jama al-Mudhakkar as-Salim. And al-Asma' wal-Khamsa. Can someone give an example when al-Asma' wal-Khamsa are not, or do not, rather I should say, do not have wow as a sign of Rafa, and instead they have Dhamma? You have an example?
Like in the case of like Jama Taksir,
yeah, you could say that. In the case of Jama, yep. Jama.
When it's more than one.
When it's more than one, when it's dual. If it's mudaf to ya al-mutakallim.
I was going to say, if it's not mudaf, if you just say like hada abun.
Hada abun, and that's an easy example.
When it's musafara.
Yeah, hada abun wa ubayyan. Ya khair. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali. All right. Salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. And what is the word for something not being Jama or Tathniya? Mufrad, correct. So then the author moves on after mentioning when the wow is a sign of Rafa, which the Sharah, which the commentator calls Niyabatul Wow Anid Dhamma, which means that when wow replaces or takes the place of Dhamma, he moves on to Niyabatul Alif Anid Dhamma, when an alif takes the place of a dhamma, meaning that a dhamma is the primary sign of rafa. So now alif is going to take the place. So he says, وَأَمَّا الْأَلِفُ, excuse me, وَأَمَّا الْأَلِفُ فَتَكُونُ عَلَامَةً لِلرَّفْعِ في تثنية الأسماء خاصة. Before going into the example of the alif, what is rafa? What is rafa? You could give the English definition or the Arabic definition. What is rafa? Nominative. Nominative. I don't know nominative. The definition we gave.
It's a state that's indicated by Dhamma.
There's a part of the definition we're looking for that connects to the definition of Arab. From the ladies, what is rafa? That's it. That's right. تغير مخصوص. Right? A specific change. Specific change, the sign of which is the dhamma or what represents it, right? So we're studying all of this is i'rab. All of these are signs of these changes. In the case of rafa, it's that specific change which is indicated by the dhamma or what replaces it. In this case, it will be the alif. So he says, the alif is a sign of rafa, of that specific change that's indicated by the dhamma or what replaces it in this one case. في تثنية الأسماء خاصة. Specifically, or if we wanted to just make it easy, only, right? In only تثنية الأسماء is that the sign. So we're going to get another vocabulary, and we've probably used it some, and that is al-muthanna, right? Al-muthanna. So we got al-mufrad. We got al-mufrad. Alhamdulillah, pins. We got al-mufrad. We got al-jama'. And you might have another derivative on that same root, like we might say majmu'an. And then, so he says tathniyatu al-asma'. Tathniyatu. Tathniyatu. Right. So this means when they're doubled, right? You might say tethniya means roughly doubling, but al-muthanna is what has been doubled. So al-muthanna Al-muthanna translates roughly as dual. And it is every ism which indicates two, male or female, with an addition at its end. Or you could say with the addition of aleph and noon in the state of rafa, and ya and noon in the state of nasab and khafad. Right? So it indicates two, that two might be male or that two might be female. So muthanna, the dual, it indicates two isms, which is isman, right? It indicates two isms, isman. They may both be feminine. They may both be masculine. If it's one feminine, one masculine, you're going to put it in the masculine case. It has an addition of a alif and nun in the state of rafa, and a ya and nun in the state of nasab and khafab, which is chapters later. All we're dealing with is signs of rafa right now. And we're not dealing yet with why it changes. And you'll see another little thing in the definition if you read the sharh. This addition alleviates the need of saying ataf and ma'tuf. It means it eliminates the need of saying wow. So rather than saying rajulun wa rajulun, you say rajulani, right? So you wouldn't say ja'a rajulun wa rajulun, right? You simply say ja'a rajulani, right? And the same in the feminine. So an example, a masculine dual is rajulan, rajulani. Feminine example is imra'atani. Imra'atani. So that's dual. And we've been talking about it some. And inshallah, you all are doing some Arabic vocabulary. So you've worked with the dual before. So Ibn Ajrum is telling us that alif is the sign of rafa in the dual, in dual nouns, right? Alif is the sign of rafa in dual nouns specifically. Muhammad. So, there are some examples. I like to have examples in the Quran. Hafiz Muslim, can you think of an example in the Quran? Or can anyone think of an example in the Quran? That's Jama. Yeah. What is an example? I want to say Surah Tahrim. Surah Tahrim is their example. See, have a look in Surah Tahrim if there's an example. Okay, well, so the example he gives is Hadara Sadiqan. Hadara as-Sadiqan. Hadara Islam Shamsiya as-Sadiqani. So the sign of Rafa here is Alif, right? Hadara Sadiqan. Or we could say Hadar al-Rajulan. Hadar al-Rajulan. Whereas if we were to say Hadar al-Rajulu, it would be al-Rajulu, right? What would be the sign of Rafa? The Dhamma. In this case, because it's dual, the sign of Rafa is Alif. Not Noon, and certainly not the Kesra on the Noon. Okay. Quran, no. Quran. No, Quran. Quran is that's it's a mufrad. Yes, it's a mufrad. وصلي على سيدنا محمد. الرجل الرجلani. This noon is the same as the noon at the end of Jama' Mudhakkar Salim. The noon represents or takes the place of the tanween that exists in some cases in Ism Mufrad. So the noon is something else. The sign of Rafa is what? The Aleph. Find it in Surah Tahrim. It's Jama'. What about the two that the two before that? Where the two play a trick on him. It's two wives. But it might be verbs, not nouns, that are or pronouns. Yeah. Surah Rahman. Yeah. Yeah. Surah Rahman. Min dunihima jannatan. Min dunihima jannatan. So there's an example. Surah Rahman's full of dual, though not all of it is ism, right? So because you have dual verbs and dual pronouns as well. But jannatan. Jannatani, right? Is the dual of what? Of Jannah. In this case, it's an ism, indicates two, feminine, with the addition of Aleph and Noon in the state of Rafa. So that's pretty simple after you've already taken Wow. But you just have to familiarize yourself with it. Familiarize yourself with it and look for examples of it in the things you're reading. Are there any questions on that? Pardon? The noon, the only case that I remember where the noon will be removed is when it's mudaf, and we'll deal with that when it comes, like the Jama' Mudhakkar Salim. It's like the noon here is just like the noon in Jama' Mudhakkar Salim. فيهما عينان تجريان. عينان too. طيب. So you have one more alama. Now he says, وأما النون فتكون علامة للرفع في الفعل المضارع إذا اتصل به ضمير تثنية أو ضمير جمع أو ضمير المؤنثة المخاطبة. أما النون فتكون علامة للرفع في الفعل المضارع. What is الفعل المضارع? Present. What is a fi'l? We gave you a definition of it though. It's a kalima. What type of kalima is it? There you are. A fi'l is a kalima that indicates a meaning. What else? What time? في الماضي حال or مستقبل. Okay, so الماضي الفعل الماضي, and I'm just doing this to make sure we're up on this vocabulary, because maybe we went through that a little quick. الفعل الماضي كلمة دلت على معنى في نفسها واقترنت بالزمن الماضي. It is a word that indicates a meaning in itself that occurs in the past. Madi, we would call that the past, what preceded the time in which we're speaking. Al-Mudari'. Al-Mudari'. Right? Al-Fi'l al-Mudari' indicates a meaning in itself that is occurring in al-hal, right? Which means this time. Aw al-mustaqbal, or the future. For example, if we add seen. So fil mudara', you would call that present tense. But I want us to learn these definitions. So fi'l kalimatun dallat ala ma'na fi nafsiha واقترنت بأحد الأزمنة الثلاثة الماضي الحال أو المستقبل. It's a word that indicates a meaning in itself that occurs in one of the three times: past, present, future. So fi'l mudari' indicates present or future in some cases. And fi'l amr, fi'lul amr, the command verb, indicates always after the command. So always in the future. Fi'lul amr. And that's a word that indicates requesting that meaning. So in fi'l mudari', إذا اتصل به ضمير تثنية. So in fi'l mudari', when something is connected to it, إذا اتصل به. So in the case of dhamma, that's a sign of rafa when nothing connects to the fi'l mudari'. In this case, the noon is a sign of rafa in the fi'l mudari' إذا اتصل به ضمير تثنية. So the fi'l mudari' can have a dhamir attached to it, right? This is another word we've used. I'm just going to write it to make sure we're all here with it. Dhamir. The plural is dhama'ir. Dhama'ir, yep. Dhamir. Okay. Roughly that translates as pronouns. So in this case, you have dhamiru tathniya. We just went over tathniya. So what does that mean? Tathniya? Dual. Dhamiru tathniya. Dhamiru tathniya. I'm going easy on you. One day we'll start talking about lines instead of dots. Dhamiru tathniyatin. Okay, so dhamiru tathniya. The pronoun, a dual pronoun, a dual that indicates two. Okay, so that is alif al-ithnain that we saw before, the damir, the alif of two. And inshallah, you are all studying some Arabic and you're able to understand basic sentences. So we're going to write an example, but we're not going to go into all of the I'm going to just do this to clean it up a little bit. We're not going to go through all of the conjugations. I'll just do an example because you might have at least the male and the female, right? So you say that, or Allah says, فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ. Notice I'm writing my kasra under the shadda. You could do that. تُكَذِّبَانِ, right? تُكَذِّبَانِ. So this is fil mudara. So it indicates a meaning. What is that meaning? Al-kadhib, waliyadu billah, lying, or denying, actually, denying, be lying, and happening in the hal. In this case, this is the fil mudara right here. The fil mudara ends in that. So everything over here is an addition. This right here, the alif, that is aliful ithnain. So tempting, but I'll give you dots. Aliful ithnain. We talked about that. It's one of the things when it attaches to fi'l mudari', dhamma is no longer the sign of rafa. So now the sign of rafa in this case is the noon. The noon is a sign of rafa instead of the dhamma. Tukadhibani. So that's what he's saying. He's saying that when you attach the pronoun of the dual, which is this alif, when you attach that, then instead of dhamma being the sign of rafa, now noon is the sign of rafa. There's a distinction here between the case of tasniyatul asma and a fi'l with damiru tathniya. In the case of tathniyatul asma, what was the sign of rafa? Not in tathniya. Alif. In the case of mudara, if damiru tathniya attaches to it, the sign is noon. Right? So don't be confused. Don't confuse those two. The last case, the alif was the rafa sign, the noon was something else. In this case, the noon is a sign of rafa, the alif is something else. The alif is the damir. However, both indicate two. And when you when we begin to introduce the actors, or even in the next section, it'll become you'll see that that aleph, this aleph is never going to change to a ya. Right? You're never going to say tukadhibaini. But in the asma, you will. And you're going to omit this noon a whole lot because that's the sign of i'rab. That's what's going to change a lot, as opposed to the asma.
Why does it say fi'l mudari is imperfect?
Imperfect. I never say that. I'm not using that vocabulary. Yeah. We're just talking about this fi'l mudari. This is when it disconnects. Or this is when, rather than dhamma, you have a noon. Yeah. Any questions on this? Have you all seen that before? You've done conjugations? Yeah, everybody's done conjugations. What did we say? Ukadhibu, tukadhibu. Who can go through the list with afalu, tafalu, afalu, nafalu, tafalina? What order do you all do in the charts you're doing?
هو هما هم هي هما هن أنا نحن.
Nahna. The English system's a little different too. In any case, you would say yukadhibani, tukadhibani, right? Yafalani, tafalani, right? In those cases, in yaf'alani and taf'alani, the sign of rafa is what? Noon. The sign of rafa is noon, and it's a fi'l mudari that has damiru tathniya attached. Now damiru jama. Before that, are there any questions before we move on to damir al-jama? Actually, let me do a few more examples too. Let me do a few more examples. I want to do some examples of other verbs. All right. All right, so yusafirani. So you say, someone give me a fi'l mudari that they know the meaning of. Yadrib. Yusafir. Okay. So you'd say yusafiru. Who knows what this means?
He travels.
He travels. So I make that tathniya like this. Yusafirani. Now the sign of rafa is the noon. Yadribu. Sign of rafa in yadribu is what? The dhamma, yadribu. So then I say yadribani, another verb. Yajlisu. So I say yajlisu. I would say it like that. Yajlisu. Oh, too many dots. Yajlisu, but then it's going to become yajlisani. And in each of these, what? The noon is the sign of rafa. The noon is a sign of rafa in those cases. All right, and then he says damiru jam'in. What does jama' mean?
More than two.
More than two, correct. Damiru jama'. Damiru jam'in, the author says. Ibn Ajrum. Damiru jam'in. plural pronoun, the damir of a group of two or more, which is, we've seen it before, that damir is waw al-jama'ah, right? In this case, it's going to be the waw of al-jama'ah. Waw al-jama'ah, the waw of a group. Okay, that line means two dots. If I do a line, it's two dots. They just run them together because it's easier, it's faster. Waw al-jama'ah. So, you all gave us some verbs. So we say yajlisu. How do I pronounce it when I want to say a group sits? Yajlisuna. So what do? I take my fi'l mudari' that didn't have anything attached to the end. So yajlisuna. Are the ladies having trouble hearing?
No, I thought that the plural for that would be yajlis.
That would be the plural of ejlis. If I say ejlis, I sit. If I'm going to say me and others, two or more, nejlis. But if I'm making a plural of huwa, it's going to become hum. So it's going to be yajlisuna, right? Yajlisuna. Notice the difference between the tathniya, which is what? What does tathniya mean? Dual. The difference between the tathniya and the jama', which means plural. Okay? This noon has a fatha, the tathniya noon has a kasra. You say aini or ani, actually ani or una, right? Yajlisuna. So this has something attached. What attached to it? Ittasala bihi. This is damiru jama'. And there's only one type of damir jama' that's going to go on the end like that. So this is damir jama'. And this is alamatu rafa'.
How do you differentiate male? Usually plural is male or female, do you know? Is there a way to differentiate?
Do you know how to conjugate? All right, who can help him?
Change the ya to a ta.
Tefalun, no.
Because some cases it's same, right?
It's yajlisna. It has noon niswa. The noon of a group of women. In the case of noon niswa, there's a sukoon on the end of the fi'l mudari' and it's mebni. It's not a state of i'rab, it's a state of just always being with that sukoon. And the noon never comes off. So that's a different case. So the damiru jama' is that one. And they don't call, I don't believe they call nun niswa a damir jama'. Yeah, I don't know if they might call it a harf jama' or something. I don't know. I've never heard that referred to as a damir. Yajlisuna. And sure, we can say antum. If I wanted to make it antum, and this is doing a little conjugation, but we'll do it. Antum tajlisuna. And there's my line. Right? Tajlisuna. No problem. Still has the same damir of a plural. Just a plural yous or a plural theys. Plural he's. So that is waw al-jama'ah. Inna Allaha wa malaikatahu يصلون على النبي. يصلون. يصلي. يصلون. لا إله إلا الله. Questions on that? No questions at all? And everybody's doing some congregations, right? Conjugations, right? Yeah, okay, so yafaluna and tafaluna, those are the cases where you have waw al-jama'ah. And that's a fi'l mudari' that ittasala bihi, it has attached to it damiru jama', a damir of jama', which is this wow. So now noon is its sign of rafa. From those that are online, is this clear? Insha'Allah. The nahu part of it's pretty clear. The sarf part of it, that's what's complex. But we want us to, we're doing nahu now, not sarf. So brush up on our sarf a little bit. If the difference between yaf'alu and yaf'aluna, yaf'alu, yaf'alani, yaf'aluna, if that's not clear, you got to brush up on that. La ilaha illallah. Okay. Do you have a question? No. La ilaha illallah. Or Damir al-Mu'annatha al-Mukhataba. Damir al-Mu'annatha al-Mukhataba. Damir al-Mu'annatha al-Mukhataba. So there we had Damir al-Jama'. Damir al-Mu'annatha. Al-Mukhataba. Al-Mukhataba. So we had al-Mudhakkar and al-Mu'annath. So al-Mu'annath, al-Mu'annatha is the female. Al-Mukhataba, it's from khitab. So Mukhataba is the woman who is being addressed. You call that what? Second person. So the damir, al-damir, damiru al-mu'annatha, Al-mukhataba is the second person feminine pronoun. It's the woman you're speaking to, plainly stated, right? The damir of the woman you're speaking to, right? So when you're speaking to a woman, the verb becomes this. It was taf'alu. Then I got to attach something to it. To put it in the case I'm speaking in. So I say taf'alina. Taf'alina. So I've attached this ya here. I've attached a ya here. And this ya is the damir. And then there's a noon, which is alamatu rafa. So you say taf'alina. Questions on that? It's clear, right? Yes. Got to raise your voice a little bit. Yes. Yeah, so it's referring to one. Yep. It's the case of anti. It's the case of anti. Anti taf'alina. So now if we look back at what Ibn Ajrum said. Question? He said, وَأَمَّا النُّونُ فَتَكُونُ عَلَامَةً لِلرَّفْعِ فِي الْفِعْلِ الْمُضَارِعِ. Noon is a sign of rafa in fi'l mudara. إِذَا اتصل به ضمير تثنية تفعلان يفعلان أو ضمير جمع تفعلون or يفعلون تفعلون or ضمير المؤنثة المخاطبة تفعلين. So if one of these three ضمائر, one of these three ضميرs, one of these ضميرs, ضمائر is a plural, ضمير تثنية, ضمير جمع, or ضمير المؤنثة المخاطبة attaches to fi'l mudari', now noon is a sign of rafa. And you have 5 examples like that. You'll say يفعلان تفعلان, يفعلون تفعلون, and تفعلين, right? يفعلان تفعلان, يفعلون تفعلون, and تفعلين. Yes.
So over there,
Lamir Tasnia and Lamir Jama are only referring to the masculine forms?
No. Taf'alani, Allah knows best, is also used for the feminine. Yeah. And I'd have to review it a little bit, but that's what's in my memory. Yeah. It overlaps a little bit. It's not like yeah, it overlaps a little bit there. Yeah. Yafaluna, yafalani, tafalani, yafaluna, tafaluna, tafalina. Yakumani, yakumani, takumani, yakumuna, takumuna, takumina. In any of the verbs, you could do that, right? Those three attachments will represent themselves in those 5 ways, and those are called al-af'al al-khamsa or al-amthilatul khamsa. Don't worry about that though. We're gonna get a grammatical case where we talk about that, maybe, and then in that case we could deal with it there. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. Allahumma salli wa sallim wa barak alayhi wa alihi. Right, is all that clear? Yeah. Are there any questions? Okay, so going back, how many signs of Rafa are there? 4. And then we took Alif and Nun today. Alif is a sign of Rafa in which cases? Yeah. وأما الألف فتكون علامة للرفع في تثنية الأسماء خاصة. So Alif is a sign of Rafa in only one case, right? In Tathniyatul Asma'. And what about Nun? When is Nun the sign of Rafa? 3 cases. What are those 3 cases?
What are the examples?
فعل مضارع
فعل
يتصل
مضارع.
به ضمير
Or,
جمع ضمير المثنى أو ضمير جمع أو ضمير المؤنثة المخاطبة.
Correct. So Nun is a sign of Rafa. في الفعل المضارع إذا اتصل به ضمير تثنية أو ضمير جمع أو ضمير المؤنثة المخاطبة. Is there any vocabulary in this 2 lines of the metin that you don't understand? Or these 3 lines, we could say? Khasa, you could say in this context, you could maybe translate it more accurately as specifically. I just said only to make it simple. So khasa is like as opposed to amma, right? So that specific thing as opposed to a general, something general. Mukhataba. Mukhataba is from khitab. It's the ism maf'ul of khitab, the female who is being addressed. So in this case, it means the female second person, the woman or a woman that you're speaking, that is being spoken to, that is being addressed. Everyone understands the verb إِذَا اتصَّلَ? You all understand اتصَّلَ?
I guess there's no question about that statement. If you're saying either masala.
What is it? You're asking what it means?
No, I mean when it attaches, right?
When it attaches, or if and when? Yeah, it has a time. Either has like a time indication, but it also has like a what is the word? A conditional indication.
So if we was doing conjugation, why wouldn't it be either yasala or is tasala part of the
Okay, so when you have either, it puts it in the present. Yeah. So if you said, you could say alladhi yattasilu if you wanted to put it present, but it doesn't really need to be as well, because you could say, you could put it in the past too. Yeah. Idha tasala bihi. And notice that tasala the ba will be used with that. That harf will be used with that verb. Idha tasala bihi. You all understand the bihi? The ha goes back to what? The fi'l mudara. That damir, idha tasala bihi, goes back to that fi'l mudara. Damiru tathniya, or damiru jama, or damir al-mu'annatha al-mukhataba. So all of that's clear. Just need some time to digest it. But you see from here the immense benefit of memorizing the matan. It just lists it for you very, very clearly. And then you just go back into your memory, boom, you can pull it up. And it organizes it well too. So in the next lesson, inshallah, prepare the saying of the author. And this is probably enough for you all, right? Yeah. للنصب خمس علامات. And if you just have a look at the matan, للنصب خمس علامات. الفتحة والألف والكسرة والياء وحذف النون. So familiarize yourself with that. We're going to talk about that and explain that. And we're also going to move on to the fetha. So he says, and after that, فأما الفتحة فتكون علامة للنصب في ثلاثة مواضع. في الاسم المفرد والجمع تكسير والفعل المضارع إذا دخل عليه ناصب ولم يتصل بآخره شيء. We're going to do that much. And when we begin dealing with nasab, you'll begin to understand why these changes are occurring. We are using the matan of Ajrumiyya. Sister named Asma asked what text we're using. She said because she's a new student. And we are using the matan of Ajrumiyya. And everyone's required to have a metin and have something to take notes with. And if you're able to benefit from it, this Sharh At-Tuhfat As-Saniyah is an excellent sharh. So, La ilaha illallah. So we're going to deal with signs of nasab. What is nasab?
Specific change.
تغير مخصوص علامته الفتحة أو ما ناب عنها. So that's what we're going to deal with. Just like al-rafa was تغير مخصوص علامته الضمة أو ما ناب عنها. Right? So now we're moving to nasab, a different change of state, the sign of which is a fetha or what replaces the fetha. So you see there are 5 signs of nasab. The first of them is a fetha, and then you're going to see those other 4, just like we did in the case of rafa, except in rafa there was the other 3. In nasab there are 5 signs, and you're going to see some of these same cases that you saw before: ism mufrad, jama' taksir, fil mudari', and so on. And inshallah ta'ala, he'll also introduce some of the cause of the change to nasab, though he's not going to list them extensively. That'll be in an independent chapter. And nawasib. And he'll list all of the causes later that bring a fil mudari' to nasab, but he'll introduce that this time. Inshallah ta'ala. Are there any questions before we close?
You just get used to all these cases as you become familiar.
Best thing to do is memorize this chapter. Yep, just memorize this chapter, and then you can list the cases from memory. And by using them, you'll be familiar with them. And then also it'll become more clear when we talk about the various causes of the change as well. But you need to learn the cases first. La ilaha illallah. Any other questions? Salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. And people always ask about how do you read Arabic that's not vowed? This is part of it. This is how you do the ends. And then the individual words, some of that's sarf and some of that's just rote memorization. Just being used to the words. And alhamdulillah wa shukrulillah ala dhalik. May Allah take you all by the hand. Inshallah ta'ala. There's a lot of barakah in this metin. A lot of barakah in this metin. If you have if you're there with the memorization, it'll serve you very, very well. If not, just sometimes as we become older or more distracted, memorizing becomes more difficult. At least do whatever you need to do to familiarize yourself with the case as well. Some of us might have to write it out. Some of us might have to do flashcards, whatever that is, charts. Do what you need to do to understand when each sign is a sign of rafa in the cases that we took, and then now in the cases that we will take nasab, and then eventually khafad and al-jazm. And may Allah give us tawfiq in that. Amen. La ilaha illallah. Please recite Fatiha, seeking from Allah that He open for us the understanding of this, give us sincere, accepted works, beneficial knowledge, good teaching, calling, and guidance. That Allah be pleased with us, please the heart of Prophet Muhammad. And that the reward of the Fatiha that we recite go to our parents, our teachers, our sheikhs, and the presence of the Prophet Muhammad. Al-Fatiha.